Ríordáin.
Thanks very much, Minister. Can I say that I was really uplifted by your remarks and by your contribution to the debate. And as has been said, often debates in this House can be quite negative, and a lot of points can be scored. But I think your own contribution has challenged us all to point to positives. And we can point to a lot of negatives, and we have to do that. We have to point to challenges. But only 2 weeks ago, I brought my 4-year-old daughter into the Pride shop, and we decked her out. We got her a flag and a T-shirt and for the Pride March on Saturday. And I was reflecting on the fact that that just would have been absolutely impossible when I was her age. And just like Deputy Function, I don't consider myself to be that old, but when we do engage with our children, we realise how old we are. And when I was her age, only a few years later, Declan Flynn was murdered in Fairview Park 40 years ago. And a homosexual act, as it was then called, was a criminal offence. And we only decriminalised homosexuality in 1993. We had a dedication on Sunday to Mervyn Taylor, who was a bastion, if you like, in these houses of equality rights, including LGBT+ rights. So I'm thinking of her, and I also think of young people, as has been described before. I often observe young people as they walk together, who are walking together in a very different Ireland than the type of teenage walking that I used to do, where one of their party or two of their party will be from, their background maybe from a different country, and they are, celebrating that, and they are engaged in that much more so than the very dull, white, pasty Ireland that I grew up in. And one of their number or two of their number may be from the LGBT+ community, and that is what they know to be right and normal and celebrated. And they are ready to defend those rights. And that is something that I find so refreshing of that generation who have handed this to us, and are handing this to my child. And that whatever happens to my child and who she may be or who she may love will be defended by these young people, and more so perhaps than my generation, who did grow up in the schoolroom of homophobic jokes and in a system that was quite oppressive, and in Ireland it was quite oppressive. And then we see across Europe, as you said yourself, Minister, Russia, Hungary, Poland, the United States, individual states, and what they're trying to do to books and to statements and to legislation in different states of America. We see troubling conversations happening in the UK, and then we see it here in this country. And I think we all have to take note of the fact that, as you said yourself, Minister, debating somebody's existence, well, that isn't up for debate. And punching down on a community who suffer higher levels of mental health or suicide just isn't good enough. And I think this month we have an opportunity to call that out. Because being a member of the LGBT community, it is different than other inequalities. Because if you're a member of the travelling community, you share that burden with your family. And you can go home to the bosom of your family and you can discuss or share that inequality or discrimination that you have suffered, and you can, I suppose, plough through life together. If you're a member of a minority group, a migrant group, you can share that burden maybe sometimes with your family. But if you're a member of the LGBT community, this is sometimes a very, very private discomfort, a very, very private hell. And the worst thing that you can do possibly in your own mind is to be honest about who you are to your own family. I mean, imagine the fear of rejection from your own family. That is a fear that I can't even contemplate. That you would be who you are to your own family and be rejected by your own family. I think sometimes we have to reflect on how big a fear that is. Again, today for Irish young people, but it is Irish young people who are dispelling that, who are challenging that, who are fighting back against that. Minister, you referenced the hate legislation, which is coming down the tracks, and I greatly appreciate that, because that is something that we have been campaigning for quite a long time. And it is different when you see what's happened in Sligo, that there is a marked difference between, as you will know, a hate-based, hate-motivated crime and other crimes. My colleague Jed Nash asked me to impress on you the need of a commitment from the Department of Justice on when they'll start public consultation on dispensing of convictions of men who were prosecuted pre-1993, because that was the second element of the Labour Party 2017 legislation, which led to the state apology marking the 25th anniversary of decriminalisation. I'll say this much about the education system, Minister, and I know people across these houses will agree with me. This is one of our biggest challenges. One of our biggest challenges is the elephant in the room about the dominance of the influence of entities who are hostile to this agenda. And we can't pretend that that doesn't exist. We can't pretend that our education system is still not dominated by the influence of patron bodies who are hostile to this agenda. Now, within the school system, there are absolutely schools who stand on their own 2 feet, who will promote Pride Month, who will speak about LGBT rights, who want to stamp out homophobic and biphobic and transphobic bullying. But we're going to have to come to a pinch point in the advancement of our republic and the advancements of our democracy, that it isn't sustainable for us to have 90% of the primary schools of this country under the patronage of bodies that are hostile to the agenda of which we all agree with in this House. So how can you have a scenario when all the parties in this Dáil, which are directly elected by the people, all the individuals in this Dáil, I believe, are in concert with this agenda, the people of the country amending the Constitution by themselves in 2015 in order to afford equal rights, equal marriage rights and equal constitutional protection to families. And yet we still allow a scenario to persist where so many of our schools and so many of our minds can be influenced by patron bodies who are hostile to this agenda. And it's not just about Pride Month, it's about every day of the life of a young LGBT person. And if you're attending that school, we're going to have to deal with that scenario. I was involved in the amendment of 37 of section of the Employment Equality Act, section 38, which was that the employment rights of an employee in a state-funded institution have to be protected, even if they were perceived to have be undermining the ethos of the school or the health institution. And we couldn't delete that section of the Employment Equality Act because constitutionally the patron body still had the right to uphold its ethos. So those who were LGBT, those who were unmarried parents, those who were divorced, their very existence, if you like, their very way that they were living their lives, was being undermined at the fact that they were teachers. We had a situation only a number of years ago where the INTO LGBT group stood in the photograph, or were asked to stand in the photograph, in Orson Uachtaráin with Michael D. Higgins. And at Carhairlig, what happened was that half of the teachers left the photograph because they didn't want to be photographed and clearly identifiable as being LGBT, because they could not be fully convinced or secure that their employment prospects would not be inhibited by the fact that they were in a photograph with the President of this country advocating for the rights of LGBT teachers. Now, that is a climate of fear. That's a climate of fear. Now, while we amended the section of the Employment Equality Act, we have to go much further. But let me not finish on a note of negativity. Let me finish on a note of love. I mean, I was greatly taken by the contribution of Deputy Kenny, and he speaks of our collective humanity. And I think what really connects us as human beings is this search for love. And their need for love. And some people find it, some people don't find it. But if you do find it, and you do get to express it, well, it is the most wondrous thing. And Pride is all about love. And I said earlier, I can't wait to bring my little 4-year-old to the Pride March on Saturday and for it to be the most normal thing in the world. And I can't wait for me to explain to her what it's all about.
Thank you.